All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to my studio for this second session in our Draw Along with the Dead series. First things first, I'll just get a thumbs up out there from y'all to make sure that you can hear me all right. And as soon as we get a thumbs up, make sure the microphone's on, we will go. We all good? All right, getting thumbs up. Excellent. All right. Well, I thank you so much, Shannon, for that lovely introduction. I too would like to pay my respects to the Jaguar and Turrbal people and also extend those respects and welcome to any First Nations peoples that might be joining us here this evening. Again, this is the second in the series for Draw Along with the Dead, which is going to accompany the European masterpieces from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York show that's happening right now at the Gallery of Modern Arts here in Brisbane. And what we're going to be doing this evening is we're going to be extending a little bit on what we started last week. But for those of you who weren't with us last week, don't worry, we'll be giving you all new information. You'll be able to draw right along with us at home. So in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about a few pieces that are in the exhibition right now, a few paintings that are in the exhibition that we're going to use as inspiration for tonight. And then we're going to dive right into doing some drawing. And of course, we have Atticus and Rachel joining us here again in my studio. It's a cold night in Brisbane. We've got the heater going and we're ready to work. Also, for those of you who were here with us last week, we are going to do some longer drawings here this evening. So sometimes these workshops that I've been doing for the museum, we've done a lot of drawings and more rapid drawings. Other workshops, you've had a chance to stretch out a little bit more and spend a little bit more time. So this evening, you'll actually have a little bit more time to do some longer poses, longer drawings, and develop them a little bit more. And it's really important for the technique, the method that we're going to be doing here this evening too. All right, so let's get started. As I spoke about last week, and I'll reiterate again this week, we're calling the series Draw Along with the Dead because we're really looking at methods and techniques of drawing, methods and techniques of life drawing, which have existed now in the Academy for hundreds of years. And all of the artists that are represented in the European Masterpieces show would have come up against drawing the body and different ways of organizing and working through drawing the body. And by the time the academies in Europe were really set up and operating within the last few hundred years, there was a very specific set of protocols and sequences that artists would go through when they were doing life drawing. And typically working from the live model, the posing model, was the end of a long process of studying artistic anatomy and medical anatomy, actually working from cadavers, from dead bodies, working from plaster casts, working from other drawings by other artists, and going through these stages of initiation until finally students were allowed to graduate, if you will, up to drawing from the live model. Now, we don't really work that way anymore. We tend to dive right in with our outstanding models and start drawing, and we begin to work backwards from the posing body to figuring out all of those other issues of anatomy, all those other issues of structure and proportion that other artists were working through first before they got to the live model. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to get into drawing tonight using a manner which is really, really lush and really beautiful and really sensitive. And that manner of drawing, I think you're really going to enjoy. Now, you might hear outside right now, I give this caveat every time I'm doing one of these presentations from my studio here, that I love my studio and it also sits right next to the train tracks outside. So right now I can hear a freight train rumbling by, and hopefully that's not too loud for y'all on the other end. All right, now, what we're going to do first is I want to show you a few paintings that are in the exhibition right now. And if y'all haven't had a chance, you've got to get here to Brisbane. If you're in Brisbane, get down to South Brisbane and have a look at the exhibition that's hanging right now at the Gallery of Modern Art. It's really an extraordinary exhibition of selected works from the Metropolitan Museum, selected works from the European collection, and it gives such an outstanding overview of 500 years of Western art history and really, really iconic works, iconic paintings by iconic painters. And we're going to talk about three of those painters tonight and look at three of their paintings and talk about some of the qualities of those paintings and how you're going to be able to bring those qualities into your drawings as we work from Atticus and Rachel here this evening. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's look at the paintings. We're going to switch now away from me. I'm going to head over to the computer. We're going to share the screen on the computer, and we're going to show you a couple of these slides, a couple of the images that are in the exhibition right now. All right, now, as you see this exhibition, or I'm sorry, as you see the slide here, and I'm going to go ahead and make it full screen for everyone. We're going to start off with this really beautiful painting by Francois Boucher. And Boucher is an artist whose work has been celebrated now for a few hundred years. He was one of the primary artists associated with a movement in France called the Rococo movement. And in particular, he's very, very well known because he was the favorite painter to the favorite mistress of Louis XV of France, Madame de Pompadour. And Louis XV actually built a chateau for her just outside of Paris. And she employed a number of different artists to decorate and create works for that chateau. And what we're looking at right here is a painting made by her favorite painter, Boucher, to be put in the dressing rooms of that chateau. And so, thus, you have Venus here, the goddess of love and beauty, here with her attendants, these little cherubs referred to as putti, who are picking out jewels and picking out clothing for her. So there's an idea here of her dressing, and there's a direct correlation between her, Venus, and Madame de Pompadour, this very famous French socialite and the official mistress to the king. And Madame de Pompadour had actually portrayed Venus in a stage play, and there's, it's thought to be a direct correlation comparison between Venus in this painting and her. But what I really want to point out here is the Rococo style. There's this airiness, this lightness, there's a sense of lushness and sensuality to the paintings. And one of the things that creates that sensitivity in the paintings is there aren't a lot of harsh outlines. Now, one of the ways that my students at the Queensland College of Art oftentimes approach life drawing especially, is through the abstraction of line. There's a tendency for most people when they come to drawing early on to use line to define form. And oftentimes it's quite a hard outline, quite a harsh outline. That's what you won't see when you start to get in these Rococo paintings. The Rococo artists were going for something softer, more atmospheric, something that went away from the classical hard-edged line and towards something that, again, was far more sensual and atmospheric. And if we go from the Boucher painting to a second painting here by another artist heavily associated with the Rococo, we're looking at Fragonard. Now, Fragonard was not, he did work, and his works are most well known as part of the Rococo. He also dabbled in classicism and some other manners. But I really wanted to point out this painting, which is in the exhibition. It's a portrait. It's called The Two Sisters. And again, you see this beautiful softness and that sort of lush quality to the color and to the paint. And if I zoom in a little bit here, there we go, and move over, you can see how you're not getting any of the harsh outlines, no hard edges. You get these soft transitions of light and value and color. And I'm going to show you a method for creating those beautiful soft transitions here this evening by working into a medium called dry ground. And for those of you who were with us last week, you experimented a bit with wet ground. Tonight, we're going to experiment with dry ground. Now, I also wanted to make mention for this particular painting that this painting, unfortunately, tragically, has been deeply, deeply cut down. And this happens to a lot of paintings through history as they're framed and reframed or moved or put into different locations, that they tend to get trimmed and cut. And this painting is only about half the size now that it was originally. And we know that because there are prints of this painting that survive. And in the Metropolitan Museum's collection, they actually have a drawing, a pastel drawing by a follower of Fragonard, a copy of this painting. And the pastel drawing shows the entire painting. You can see the entire hobby horse and everything in it. And so I believe that Shannon's going to post a link to that. You can look at it in the Metropolitan Museum's collection, and you can see the comparison between the full composition in the pastel drawing and what remains of the original Fragonard portrait here, this painting. And the last one that I'll show now as an example is this painting by Renoir. And most of you would know Renoir as a sort of icon of the French Impressionist movement. And this is actually a really interesting portrait again here called By the Seashore, because and it says this, if you read the Metropolitan's didactic too, most likely this was done in his studio. This is a chair that he had in his studio. And most likely this was a model who was seated indoors in his studio. and then Renoir superimposed a backdrop of the seaside here, probably taken from studies that he did on plein air, of the seashore. So it's an interesting little composited image here of the foreground sitter and the background, which is a fantasy of her sitting by the seashore. But again, if we look at the painting by Renoir, you'll again see this beautiful softness as I zoom in, and the way that forms are defined just through tone and color and value. And what you don't get is, again, that hard outline, what we refer to as a contour line that surrounds things. Even if you look down here on the arm of the chair, you can see the way that the background and the arm, they really begin to blur together and create a beautiful sense of the atmospheric here. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're really going to focus on reducing the line, that heavy outline. I know this is going to be difficult for some of you out there who really love that line and rely on that line, but I'm going to show you some techniques where you can begin working with value, begin working with texture, and then slowly build up the form rather than beginning with line. All right, let's break out of that slideshow then and come back to me. Am I back again? All right, thank you. I'm getting thumbs up. Excellent. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot again, and I'm going to switch from this camera where you're seeing myself and Atticus and Rachel, and we're going to switch over to another camera that I have set up on my desktop so that I can do a little bit of demonstration for you. So all you're going to see is my hands and some tools, and you'll hear my voice coming through. And then we'll kick it back over to our main camera here, and we'll zoom in, and we'll get a good framed view of Atticus and Rachel posing, and we'll dive right into our very first drawing. All right, so the first thing I want to do is talk about materials and then show you the techniques we're going to use. So let's pivot over here to my desktop. All right, is that coming up on screen? All right, and pardon me, y'all. Everybody take a moment, take a drink. I'm gonna have a sip of coffee. Atticus and Rachel are both grabbing their drinks. Well done, y'all. All right, now here on my desktop, I've got a couple of basic supplies. So underneath my board here, I have just some ordinary white drawing paper. And so I'll be working just on ordinary white drawing paper. I have a graphite pencil, and I have a soft graphite pencil here. This is a 4B pencil. I have a couple of charcoal pencils. And so these are compressed charcoal pencils, also soft pencils. I also have a compressed charcoal stick, a soft compressed charcoal stick, and a piece of willow charcoal. Willow charcoal, which is a carbonized piece of willow. Now, a lot of you drawing at home will be working in graphite this evening. I'm not going to use a lot of graphite just because it's difficult for the camera to pick up the subtleties of the graphite. So I'll be working quite a bit in charcoal just so it's easy for you to see what I'm doing as I'm working. But this technique that we're using will work really beautifully with graphite. So feel free to have your graphite out and ready. Any of you who also work in soft pastels will work beautifully for these drawings that we're doing. I also have a couple of plastic erasers. These are just vinyl erasers, plastic erasers. I'm not really going to use a kneaded eraser this evening, one of the latex gum erasers either, because those things get gummed up really, really quickly. So I'll be using these plastic erasers when I need to do that. Now, for dry ground, this will piggyback a little bit on what we were doing last week, because we're going to be using some of the same materials that we talked about last week, but we're going to be using them in a very, very different way, because last week we were using polyvinyl acetate glue, and we were mixing these ground materials with that glue as a binder and using that to create our surface. We're not going to do that this evening. We're going to work just with these powdery materials in order to create a dry ground. And we're going to draw back through that dry ground. And I think you're really going to enjoy it because it gives a completely different feel to the paper that you're drawing on, and a completely different feel to the way that your different materials move within that dry ground, whether it's charcoal, pastel, graphite, whatever it is. So here's what I have this evening. I have first just white chalk. This is ordinary calcium carbonate white chalk. And all I've done here is take my mortar and pestle, and I've taken pieces of white chalk that you can see here, and I've just ground them up into a powder. And that's just ordinary white school chalk that I've used there. Now you have to be aware, sometimes school chalk can have gypsum mixed into it. It might not be pure calcium carbonate, might not be pure chalk, but chalk will work really well. So I have some ground up chalk here that I'm going to use. I also have talcum powder. Talc, again, is a very soft, natural mineral, and talc is probably the least effective of these dry grounds, but still gives some really beautiful results. So if you have some talc and that's all you've got, let's experiment with the talc tonight, and I think you'll really enjoy it. If you have baby powder, most likely what you have is a combination of talcum powder. You can look at the ingredients on your baby powder and this, which is cornstarch. All right. So we have talcum powder there. And then this is just ordinary cornstarch. And cornstarch makes a really, really beautiful dry ground as well. There are baby powders, if you have that, which are pure cornstarch, just with a bit of fragrance in them. So we're going to have cornstarch. We're going to have talcum powder. We're going to have chalk. And then I've got a wild card for you. And I brought this in just because I was doing this with my students at the Queensland College of Art today, and they were getting some really beautiful results. And this is a less common material, but I thought I would bring it just to show you. And what you're looking at here is clay. This is a very, very soft, natural white clay called kaolin. It's sometimes referred to also as China clay, but it's very, very soft and very, very silky smooth and powdery. It's used in a lot of beauty products. It's used in a lot of theater and stage makeup and things like that. Most likely all of you have experienced this in your lives and put it on your skin before. But this is it in just its powdered form. And I'm just going to show it to you when I do the demo so you get a sense of what that's like. Kaolin is Kaolin. And so I'll show you that. I'll show you the talc. I'll show you the cornstarch. I'll show you the chalk. All right. And I'm going to do it first on a piece of board here that's got a little bit of tone to it so that you'll be able to see the whiteness of each one of these materials. Then I'm going to move over to a piece of drawing paper so you can see how it behaves there. Now, when you're preparing your paper for drawing, all that you're going to do is put that dry ground down onto your piece of paper and then softly massage, rub that paper, get nice and tactile with it, rub that dry ground into the surface of your paper. And what's going to happen is that powdery material is going to start to fill up all of those spaces, those tiny, minute spaces between the paper fibers, and start to create a dry ground surface. The ground, again, is something that you're imposing between your substrate, in this case board or paper, and your drawing materials, in this case charcoal or graphite. So for example, if I were going to do this with my chalk, I'm just going to knock out a little bit of my chalk here like that onto my board. Can you see that all right on screen over there? Yes, I'm getting thumbs up. And then what I'm going to do is just very softly just start rubbing that in to the surface. Now, again, I'm going to do this on the board first so that you can see the effect that it has. So that's just dry white chalk. Now, I'm going to keep rubbing it in. If it has some powder still that's existing on the surface, that's fine. And you probably can't hear it. I don't think my microphone is sensitive enough to pick it up, but there's actually an abrasive. There's a scratchy kind of noise that it's making. Can y'all hear that from over there? Yes. Rachel and Ben are giving me a nod that they can hear that. So it's because the chalk is gritty. Even though it's very finely ground, it still has some grit to it, and you'll feel that texture on the surface. Now that's very different from the talc. All right, and so I'm going to put a little talcum powder now on this corner. There we go. Talc. Talc is even finer than the chalk, and it's also going to be softer. So if I stop talking for a minute, which is difficult for me, y'all can't hear that at all, can you? Right, so that's not making any sort of scratching. But the other thing that the talc will do, because it's such a fine mineral, such a fine powder, it will completely inundate your paper. And because it's completely inundating your paper, it actually will take away some of the ability of your charcoal or graphite to abrade on that paper and leave a mark. And you'll see what kind of effect that has here in just a minute. So this was chalk, white chalk, calcium carbonate. This is talc. Now, next, I'm going to do the cornstarch. So I'm just going to take a pinch of the cornstarch here, just like you were making a sauce up in the kitchen. Okay, got my cornstarch there. Just wipe my hands. And then I'm going to very softly rub that cornstarch in. And now we're going to do an audio test again. Yeah, I'm getting thumbs up that they can hear that because the cornstarch again is grittier. But you also see that the cornstarch, it doesn't tint. Cornstarch doesn't have very much tinting power. Whereas the chalk leaves the white and the talc leaves the white, the cornstarch will rub away till it's almost invisible. All right, we have a question. Calcite, yes. Calcite, whiting, marble powder, those are all different forms of calcium carbonate. So absolutely, if you have calcite or whiting, or even something, sometimes it's sold under the name of marble dust. They probably charge more for it. There it is. Okay, there are different grades. Don't get me wrong. I'm being a little flip about that, but there are different grades of chalks, different grades of calcium carbonate. But yes, you're dealing with the same basic material. All right, so that's our cornstarch there. And then finally, we have this clay, this kaolin, this fine white clay. And I'm just going to put a tiny bit of that down. This is one of my absolute favorite studio materials. You can see that the powder, I don't know, can you see on screen that that's a little bit warmer? Yeah. And now this is just the silkiest smooth thing that you can ever imagine. It's just like it's just like rubbing velvet onto the surface. And you can also see that it's got a lot of tinting power. Very, very, very white. So that's how we create a dry ground. Again, this was our chalk, this was our talc, this was our clay, and this was our cornstarch. Now, the whole purpose of working with these dry grounds is to see the different effects that it has on your drawing materials. So if I do a couple of dark marks with my charcoal pencil right there in the middle of my board, and then I'll just make sure I have all of the powder off my fingers before I give this a little bit of rub. And there you go. And then I rub that, you'll see what happens. I can rub it a little bit, but you can, I'm assuming the computer's a long way away from me here, but you can still see those 3 lines very, very clearly. Now I'll do the same thing with the chalk. I'll make 3 lines in the chalk like that, and it has a completely different feel. The chalk has now added more grit to the surface of the paper, so it's actually abraded the charcoal even more and left more of a mark. And then if I rub back into it, because now the chalk is blending, and also because a lot of the charcoal is riding on top of the chalk, you get that beautiful soft gray. And you can see I'm almost able, without using an eraser, to rub those marks away completely. Is that coming through on the monitor? Yeah, thumbs up. Now the talc. Okay, I'll do 3 lines on the talc. And what you'll probably notice there is that you can barely see those lines because, again, the talc has really filled up the paper so much so that the paper is no longer really abrasive. And so the charcoal is just riding on top of that talc. So if you're using talc, use it sparingly, but you can still really use it beautifully to blend and add tone and blend and add tone. And remember what we're after, Renoir, Boucher, Fragonard, is that softness, that beautiful softness. Now I'll move over here to the clay, again, which is one of my favorites. And again, you can see how even though I'm really pressing with that charcoal pencil, the mark doesn't show up very much at all. And then I can rub back through. And so when you're working with that, that clay, it really is about building up through many, many layers that charcoal and rubbing, and you can get these beautiful soft atmospheric effects. And finally, our cornstarch up here at the top. All right. And now you can see, because the cornstarch is so fine, it has the least amount of ability to fill up the fibers, that the charcoal still comes through it. But now look, even when I rub that with the cornstarch, I can still rub back a lot of it, much more so than I can when it's just on the straight paper. So what this is going to enable us to do here this evening, as you're drawing Atticus and Rachel, working on dry ground is going to enable you to build up the drawing slowly, to build it up with tonalities, to really reduce the strength and power of your lines and start to get some of those really beautiful and lush atmospheric effects. All right, so I'm going to switch over now. I promise we'll be done with the demo in just one moment, and we'll get on to drawing our friends here in studio. All right, so I'm moving over now to my sheet of white drawing paper. All right, we see that all right on screen? Okay, there we go. Now my sheet of white drawing paper. And I just want to do this really quickly one more time for you so you can see it now on white paper. All right, so what I'm going to do So I'm going to put a little bit of chalk there. Okay. Rub that in really, really well. There we go. White chalk. I'm going to put a little bit of talc there. Rub that in. Okay. And this is what you'll do. You'll just gently, I'm not pressing really hard. I'm just gently massaging it into the fibers of the paper. I'm going to take a little bit of my cornstarch. I'm going to have to tell my wife I just got talc in her cornstarch. Yeah, it'll taste fine. All right, I'm gonna rub that in a little bit too. The sauces will have a little something extra there. All right, nice. All right, and finally, I've got my clay right there, and I'm gonna rub that clay in. Okay, there. All right, so I've got clay, chalk, cornstarch, and talc. And now what I want to do is again show you with my charcoal here, 3 strong lines on my paper, and then rubbing back over that with my finger, and you can see how that operates. Now, 3 strong lines on my chalk. Beautiful, beautiful. And then rubbing back over that gently with my finger. And you should be able to see that difference quite dramatically there. Now, if you're doing this with the dry grounds, the other thing that you can do is if you've got other chalk on there, or you can always add more chalk and continue to rub it in and continue to draw on top and rub it in again and again. And that's what we're going to do to build it up. You can also take your plastic erasers and cut right back through that chalk. And what I want to show you now is those 3 strong lines that I drew at the beginning. When I'd cut back through the chalk with the eraser, are they almost gone on screen? Yeah. Now I'll try to do the same thing to these 3 strong lines. Pressing, 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 pressing with my charcoal. And you can see I'm much less able to subtract, right, to erase those lines, because now that charcoal has inundated the paper, whereas here the charcoal was riding on top of that chalk. There we go. That's the whole idea here. And let's give it to on the talc there. You can see beautiful marks on the talc, and then rubbing back through to get that softness. And then again, I can take my plastic eraser and I can cut right back into it again. Same thing with the cornstarch, rubbing in, pulling back out. Again, the cornstarch will be the least effective of these methods, but it still will work really beautifully. If that's all you have in your cupboard at home, try that cornstarch, and I think you'll be really still get a good experience of it. And finally, the clay, which will really fill out, give you those beautiful, beautiful marks, and then just rubbing back into it again like that. The clay, however, is the most difficult to erase. And I'll show that there as I try to erase back through it. Okay. Yes, we have one more question, then we're going to kick it back over to seeing our models. Yes. Sorry? This is just ordinary cartridge paper. This is just white drawing paper. It's not heavyweight at all. This cartridge paper is probably 65, 70 GSM. So it's a very lightweight drawing paper. And again, cartridge paper is a uniquely Australian word for white drawing paper. That's all it means. Okay, so whenever you see cartridge, that's just an ordinary cellulose. It's a wood pulp based white drawing paper. That's all it is. Some have a little bit more texture, what's called tooth. Some will have a little bit more tooth, some will be smoother, you know, but ultimately all of those white drawing papers are largely the same. Okay, let's kick it back over to me now. My goal was to get through all of that in 30 minutes. How'd I do? Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, all right. Excellent. I'm gonna have another little sip of coffee here, y'all. Pardon me. Nice. Okay, we're gonna get on to our first drawing. Now, in the spirit of Boucher, in the spirit of Fragonard, in the spirit of Renoir, I'm going to ask you for this drawing to begin by starting to fill out the shapes that you see in Rachel's body and Atticus's body, and even some of the environment that you see around them. We very intentionally put a black backdrop behind them so you can begin to build out that value and shape, and then slowly work your way into the detail and some of the more nuanced forms that you see. I'm going to do a little demonstration for you when we get started to show how you're going to both use the dry ground on your whole sheet of paper, and then begin building up the form through big, bold shapes, rubbing it back, building it up again, rubbing it back, So you get that density on your drawing, but you also get that really beautiful, velvety, soft, lush quality that we're after here for our drawing in dry ground. All right, so let's get started. Get your paper set up, whatever size you have. If you have some dry ground materials, get those all ready to go. If you're madly grinding up chalk with the back of a spoon right now, that's beautiful. Get yourselves all set. We're going to get Atticus and Rachel into their first pose. I'm going to zoom this camera in so you've got more of a framed view of them. And we're going to kick off this first drawing going a little bit longer. We're going to go 15 minutes. This is going to be a warm-up drawing. Then we're going to come back and reflect on this drawing a little bit. And then we're going to go for an even longer drawing. We're going to go 20, 25 minutes on a drawing. So it'll give you enough time to really get stuck into the drawing and really start to experiment with it. Yes. Give me another question. Yes. Corn flour and cornstarch are largely the same. If that's all you've got, use the corn flour, but you'll see the difference. The corn flour won't be quite as fine as the cornstarch. Also, corn flour can have a little bit more trouble just in terms of its longevity. Yes. Oh yeah. Now fixatives. Oh, everybody always asks about fixatives. There are times when I walk out of our drawing studio down at South Bank and there is just a cloud of fixative where students are spraying it. Look, we don't I don't ever recommend spraying your drawings. When you're talking about a fixative, you're ultimately talking about some sort of an adhesive binder, which is in a solvent, right? So most fixatives are alcohol-based varnishes, and that's all it is. It's a very weak alcohol-based varnish. Now you get some that are shellac-based, you get some, God, I don't even know what kind of starch was in old hairspray. Some of them have starches in them. But ultimately what you're doing when you spray fixative on something is you're soaking all of the particles of chalk or charcoal or pastel or whatever it is with a liquid varnish, with a binder, an adhesive, which is then gluing it to your paper, which is making it stick. When you do that, it fundamentally changes the quality of your drawing. Now, there are some people will try to spray very, very lightly fixatives on their drawings, but generally we don't recommend that. Generally, the best way to take care of your drawings are to put cover sheets over them that can't rub against them, so you don't get any friction at all. And you'll find in conservation culture that you won't see a lot of support for spraying glue or varnish all over the surface of a drawing in order to fix it. Now, fixatives are much better now in the 21st century than they were, 30 years ago when I went to art school. And there are some good pastel fixatives that are gum based on the market. But bear in mind, whenever you're using a fixative, you're gluing the particles to the paper. That's what a fixative does. That's how it operates. All right, good questions. Now, that was my tangent. I tell my students to bury their fixative in the yard, but I won't tell you all that. Okay, let's get on to our first drawing. All right, so get your paper set up, and we're going to flip back over to this other camera, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to set up my paper with chalk. So I'm going to use chalk. Those of you who have calcite or whiting, that will work well. If you have ordinary white chalk, just school chalk, that will work too. All right. And let me just move my materials here onto a fresh sheet of paper, get that out of the way. All right, and to prepare my surface now, again, all that I'm gonna do is sprinkle that chalk over the surface of my drawing. So I've ground it all up here. I have a good bit of it that I've ground up. Can you see that all right on screen? Yep, I've got a good bit. I'll take these other chunks of chalk that I haven't ground up yet out. And even if you've got some coarser chunks on there, no big deal. Okay, so I'm just sprinkling that chalk on to the surface of my paper like that. And then again, just using my whole hand, there we go. And I'm just rubbing that chalk into the surface of the paper. And now it might not feel at first like you're doing much, but trust me, you are. You're going to be distributing and slowly massaging that dry ground down into your paper. And again, it'll give your paper a completely different feel. If you've never done this before, if you're an experienced drawer who's never done this before, I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll be just a very, very different experience of your page. Okay. Now, I know you don't see much there on screen, but I've now rubbed that in. I have some powder still that's floating around on the surface. I can even You can see I can even get it into a little pile there in the middle, but it doesn't matter that I've got that powder still floating on top. I'm just going to leave that on top of my drawing, because as I start to draw Atticus and Rachel now, I'm going to use that to rub back in, to redraw, to rub back in again. So I've got my charcoal, I've got my plastic erasers. For those of you who have pencils, I recommend a soft pencil so you can get some graphite down there on the surface rather than using a hard pencil, which won't deposit very much graphite. All right, so there we go. I've got my chalk. Now let's get Atticus and Rachel set up. So let's do both of you seated on the stage, and let's do a simple pose to begin with. Something which is in tandem, where we're, yeah, 2 levels would be excellent. Thank you. And let's switch cameras again. Are we switched back? All right, and I'm going to zoom a bit. There we go. And I might even just crop a bit. So apologies there for those of you who are getting a bit of a crop. I'll come out just a bit. And let's focus. How's that focus look on screen? That looks good? All right, excellent. Okay, 15 minutes sound good to y'all? All right, we're going to go 15 minutes on this first drawing. Now, before you start drawing, if you could kick it back over to my desktop camera here. What I recommend now for you when you begin your drawing is to change your method from line to shape. So even if you're working with a charcoal pencil, instead of beginning, as I look here at Rachel, instead of me beginning by drawing her forehead and drawing the shape of her head like that and drawing the shape of her mask and just starting to begin with line, as would be normally might feel quite comfortable for you to do, instead of working that way where you begin outlining, what I'm going to ask you to do is start adding some of your material down and rubbing it in to start to build an overall shape. So instead, the way I'm going to approach her head is laying down the shape of her head and then rubbing it back in like that, and then finding the shape of her shoulders coming down her arm. And you can see I'm being quite loose and quite quick like that. We're getting the impression of this rather than a hard edged description of it. And I'm going to start to build it up really, really quickly there. And even though I can see her hip coming there, coming down to her leg, I'm going to start to fill it in, and I'm going to see her leg as a shape like that, rather than an outline that goes around it. And again, as I'm filling it in, I'm going to begin rubbing it back. So I start to build up the form like that. Now, if you want to refine that form, you can come back into it with your plastic eraser. So if I wanted to refine that shoulder, now I can come back in and I can cut away around that shoulder so that I'm creating an edge there with a shape, a gray shape against the whiteness of the background, rather than creating the edge with a line. All right. And then what you're going to do is just keep building it up. So you can squint your eyes and see the value and see where there's darker value, and then rub it back. And again, more dark value, a space in there, begin rubbing. And so what I'm going to do is just slowly over the course of this 15 minutes, keep developing up that drawing by adding tone and rubbing and adding tone and rubbing. And so you're building up that density. And what you're also trying to get is that beautiful kind of ethereal softness that we saw in the other paintings that we were looking at. All right. So just be patient with yourself. Over 15 minutes, you'll have a lot of time to build it up. You can always add, if you need to, more of your dry ground material. If you're feeling like it's feeling a little too, like you're lacking some of that texture, just add some more dry ground to it and rub back into it again. All right. And I'm going to continue to work on my drawing. So as we work through your drawings, we'll check back in periodically with my drawing. All right. So let's snap back here. All right. So what I want you to do is really look now at Atticus and Rachel. Start your drawing and look at their overall shape. Start laying down some value, laying down some material, and then be quite active in terms of rubbing back into the dry ground, building up more material, rubbing back into the dry ground again, and developing up the drawing rapidly, but in many, many, many layers. So you're really getting a density to your drawing again. A 2B pencil will work. Yes, absolutely. A 2B. So again, as you're drawing, I'll just remind, I did a whole thing about pencils in one of my draw alongs that we did last year. So some of you might have missed that. What makes a pencil hard or soft is simply the amount of clay that's mixed in with the graphite. So if there's more clay mixed in with it, you'll have less graphite, which means less material that makes it dark and gray. And it'll be harder. So a 2B is still not a very soft pencil, but it's superior to an HB or a 2H or a 4H. If you can get an even softer pencil, a 4B, a 6B, an 8B, that'll put more graphite down on your drawing. But yes, if you have a 2B pencil, go for it. If your charcoal is graded, to soft, medium, hard, or 2B, 4B, 6B, use the softer charcoal as well for this process. And that'll just give you, if given more time, you can experiment with it more. But for this evening, when we're working together, that'll give you more immediate feedback in the way that this dry ground works. Oh God, yes, yes, yes. My producer is just giving me a question about paintbrushes or sponges too. Absolutely. If you have soft paintbrushes, you can absolutely use paintbrushes to move this material around. You can absolutely use sponges. One of my favorite tools to use, I have bags of them in my studio, are the really beautiful dense foam. I think they're makeup sponges. Are they for removing makeup? What are those? Those white sponges you buy at the chemist? Yes, I think they're for removing makeup, but they're a beautiful, soft, dense white foam. And I keep bags of them in my studio. I use them for everything. I use them in painting. I use them in drawing. And those are quite beautiful to use for this process too of rubbing back in. Artists used to use chamois a lot, a little piece of chamois leather. And in fact, chamois leather predates erasers. And artists would use a chamois to blend prior to the use of paper stumps and things like that. All right. And y'all will get used to me yammering on while you're drawing here. All right. So through this first 5 minutes, hopefully now you've got your dry ground down, and you've at least got your first layer of material that defines their entire bodies. So you've got some good material, you've defined their entire bodies, and now you can begin to refine those bodies by adding more material, rubbing back, and adding more darkness. And then if you want to get really, really dark, you might have to erase back through some of your dry ground and then put the darkness back down again. All right. And I'm going to get in. I've been talking too much. I haven't been drawing. So I'm going to get in and do a bit of drawing too. And let that charcoal fly. Really try to get some, or pencil, so some graphite, or pastel. Those of you who are drawing with pastel, try to get some material down there on the surface. And remember that you're trying to define the bodies through those interactions, those soft interactions of value, soft interactions of shape, rather than defining it with line. I oftentimes tell my students that drawing exclusively with line is actually one of the most difficult ways to draw, and one of the most difficult ways to learn to draw. Actually working more loosely with shape and finding value shapes and the relationship between those shapes is a much more rapid way of drawing, and it's also a much more rapid way of learning the relationships between those shapes. If any more questions come in, just pop them through to me or just holler at me. Say it one more time. Say it louder. So if you're going to use your erasers, your plastic eraser, that's to cut back through and pull out your light. So think about the light shapes, just like you think about the dark shapes. And think about how you can use that eraser. If it's getting really gray, if you're doing a lot of rubbing back on your grounds, your drawing might start to feel really, really gray, and everything sort of pulling to a sort of middle gray. And if that starts to happen to you, just get back in there with your plastic eraser and cut back into it. All right. We'll check back in with me here in just a minute, okay? And that's in fact what I'm doing right now on my drawing, is I'm getting back in now with my plastic eraser, and I'm cutting back through some of that to bring some light back into the drawing where it had lost some of the light and gotten too gray. And again, the point of this again is to get that softness, to give the impression rather than the description. All right, y'all. We're about halfway there. So we're going to check in with my drawing again in just a minute. Any other questions coming through there? Yeah, absolutely you can. So I teach a method that's called scumbling as well, where you can do this if you have a soft pastel, like a white pastel, where you can actually work the pastel into the paper first. And then what you're really doing is you're working a white pigment down into your paper, a titanium dioxide pigment. But you can absolutely use that as a ground and then and begin cutting back into it. Yes. All right. Just a minute here, and then I'll have you switch back over to my camera just really briefly, and then we'll get people back into their own drawings. How y'all holding up? All right? Good. Warm enough? All right, I've begun to build up my drawing now. If you want to kick back over to mine and have a look. So I've been building up my drawing and starting to develop up a little bit more. So what I'm doing is just adding more of the dark where I start to see the darks. So more dark there in the hip and coming up into the knee. But then I want to get the light back into the knee. So I'm going to scrub back in with my plastic eraser and just put that light back in. But then I can also feel how that calf coming down the shin into the foot can just be rubbed back through and allowed to be very, very soft and very gestural in that way. Or the other foot coming through could be very, very soft and gestural. So again, this is all about creating this really beautiful impression of the body rather than getting in there and really trying to create dense outlines of the body. All right, let's switch it back to Atticus and Rachel, and let's go about another 5 minutes, y'all. All right, and I don't know why I did your mask as dark rather than light. I'm going to come back in and make it light right now, though I think it's going to make you look quite skeletal. I've gotten so used to drawing masked models, it's going to be hard to go back to to seeing faces again. We're going to have to keep this up after we've I say hopefully after we've gotten through COVID. So those of you who are working with materials where, especially if it's a material where it's easier to work line than it is shape, let's say if you're working with a graphite pencil, as an example, what you're gonna have to do is really work on the side of that pencil and really just try to, using the side of the pencil, get more and more graphite down on the surface so that you're beginning to push that graphite around in the drawing rather than just drawing lines through your dry ground. And that's actually something we're going to explore even more next week. So next week, we're going to be working in the dark manner, looking at the Baroque. And what we're actually going to be doing there is working with, instead of light powdered materials like we're working with tonight in the ground, we're going to work with dark powdered materials and actually laying in and rubbing in those dark materials into the surface. And that's something we will actually do with graphite. So one thing that you can do with graphite is you can just work the side of it, or you can even abrade a little bit of graphite off to the side of your paper and then rub it back in with your fingers. All right, one more minute, y'all. Then we'll give Atticus and Rachel a little breather before we go into the next drawing. All right, I'm curious out there too. When we finish this drawing, I'll have to get some impressions from all the participants out there in the chat about how it's feeling, what you think about the overall texture and feel and just the experience of that dry ground. All right, tick tock, last few seconds. And we're out. All right, thanks very much, y'all. Okay, now let's pop back. Here, I'm gonna just actually zoom back out again a bit. Let's bring it back out. There we have it. Now I'll pop back into the frame. Now, as Atticus and Rachel relax a little bit here in the background, am I back in frame now? Okay, good. Now, when you're thinking about the way that you're working their bodies on that dry ground, you've laid that dry ground down on your sheet of paper. So as you're looking, for example, at Atticus here, you're thinking about starting to lay in some dark where you see the cast shadows. You squint your eyes and see this is dark, but there's highlight here. This is dark on the side of his chest, but there's highlight there. And where you see those darks, just start laying in those shapes with as much material as you can, and then rubbing them back. And where you see darkness behind him, lay in the darkness behind him and let the light edge define that I should say, let the light shape define that edge between the light of his body and the dark of the background. So you can actually use that dark background very much to your advantage. And what you're trying to get is just that interaction of shapes that goes on. As we look at Rachel here sitting, same thing. If I squint my eyes, I see the whole side of her thigh is darker compared to the top of her thigh or the top of her arm. Underneath into her chest, darker, so underneath her chin. So you're looking for, squinting your eyes and looking for those big shapes, trying to lay that material down and get those big shapes and keep rubbing and refining and rubbing and refining and building up those layers. All right, we're going to go on into our next drawing now. And for our next drawing, I want you to prepare yourself another sheet of dry ground. So move that drawing off to the side, get yourself a fresh sheet and put down some dry ground again. Put it down and give it a little bit of a massage, a little bit of rub, just get it nice and inundated there. All right, and now we're gonna go on to a slightly longer drawing. Are y'all okay for a longer drawing? I'm getting a big yes energy back here that we're gonna go longer. So we're gonna push this drawing out to 20 to 25 minutes. I can't believe it's almost 8 o'clock already. How does this happen? All right, so we're gonna push this drawing, and I swear to you, we're gonna have time for 2 more drawings, but we're gonna dive right into this one. So what we're gonna do now, that was a simpler pose, a kind of seated and closed pose. Now we're gonna have Rachel and Atticus working across the stage more. You might get some slightly more complex shapes, but I'm going to come back to my desk when I prepare the my dry ground, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can use that background to really help you define those edges. So let's let Atticus and Rachel get into their pose, and while they get into their pose, let's switch camera back over to my desk again. Okay, all right. And I've got a fresh sheet of paper now. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chalk again. I'm going to get my chalk to begin with. Nice sprinkle of it there. Now I've got a little bit of charcoal on my fingers already, so I might get a little bit of gray as I put it in this time, but I can emphasize while I do that, that you can do toned dry grounds, of course. So by mixing a little bit of ochre or oxide into your chalk or whatever material you're using, by using even pastel, soft pastel, what I'll oftentimes do is take soft pastels and even just take a piece of sandpaper and sand them and grind them to make some powder. And then I'll take that and I'll rub that in and I'll get a beautiful toned ground, which I can build up on top of. So there's so many things that you can do with dry ground on any type of paper. So unlike wet ground, where because you're using a wet media, some paper can't handle it. It's not up to it. With a dry ground, you can just let it fly on any sort of paper you can imagine. All right, so I've got my dry ground there. Okay, and we've got Atticus and Rachel into their poses now, where they're doing reclining poses. We're going to switch the camera back over again. All right, there we go. And let me get it all framed up. Have I got them completely in there on screen? And focus. How's that look? All right, I'm getting thumbs up from our producer here. All right, now, as I look at this drawing and grab my bamboo stick, and I'm going to squat down into your frame here, y'all. Now, as I look, for example, at that dark background, you can really see the way the contours of Rachel's body push right up against that dark background. You can see the same thing here as you're looking at Atticus and the stage behind, the way that that dark background gives you a contour that wraps all the way around. You can use that dark contour. So let's come back over to my desk now. Whoa, try not to kick over the camera. All right, we back? All right, so one of the things that you can do, and for this, I'm just gonna grab my stick of charcoal to keep this really loose. And I'm gonna look, I've got a slightly different view than y'all have of their bodies because I'm off to the side here. But now what I can see is I can actually see the step coming in here. It comes up, Rachel's body there, up over her buttocks and down along her thigh. And then I'm hitting, for me, I see the edge of the stage again coming that way. So her body is coming down here from my point of view. What I can do is just lay in that line that indicates first that edge that goes all the way in. But then what I'm going to do is just come back and I'm going to remove that line completely and start to create that background just like that. Okay. So now I've got that dark background, which is pushing against that light of the body. And you can see how soft and atmospheric that is right away. And then once I've got that, I've got enough chalk and charcoal now, even that I can begin working right into the body with those grays and starting to feel the shapes that I'm seeing as I come up into her shoulders, into her elbow, where her head is, over here. And I'm just going to keep rubbing with that chalk and charcoal and start defining it with that really beautiful softness throughout. All right, we're going to go 20 minutes on this. All right, so let's switch cameras again. We'll come back and check in on my drawing from time to time. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so get right into it now. I'm going to start the time. And let's give yourself a little bit of time to develop this drawing. So be patient, get those shapes in, rub them back, rebuild the shape, rub it back again. Think of those paintings we looked at the beginning, the Renoir, the Fragonard, that sense of softness, the way that those bodies just blended into the environment and the atmosphere, that you didn't have hard edges, classical edges, but you had that overall sense, that sensual sense of space and impression. Yes, there's another question. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes. So for proportion, and I know that, you know, if as you develop up more experience drawing, you'll get a better sense and better sense and better sense of the proportions of the body. But if you're still working through those proportions and you're still working to get some accuracy with your proportions, yes, you can use some of those lines from last week that we used to do foreshortening to try to organize the bodies. But even though we refer to those as mapping lines, even though you may use some of those mapping lines, try to avoid actually doing those outlines in the body. So you might use some of those mapping lines for those of you who are with us last week for foreshortening, but even with those mapping lines, try to build shapes within those lines rather than building lines, more lines within those lines. So I'd say yes and no. What is that old line from The Simpsons? Yes with an and, or no with a but, right? Yes. Yeah. All right. Yeah, you got to really, for those of you who are working with your plastic erasers, you can really got to grind back through that material to pull it back up off the surface. But you're absolutely, depending on the type of paper you have, it may be easier to pull back out with the eraser, or it may be harder. But again, this is, as in all of these draw along workshops, and just as we talked about last week with the wet grounds, these are things that it's going to take experimentation. You're going to have to find those combinations of materials which work best for you. The combination of drawing material, the combination of surface, the combination of ground material, and the type of eraser. Now, I actually have an eraser. I have two plastic erasers with me, and I have one that's a little bit of a cheater eraser because I have a special vinyl eraser that actually has pumice mixed in with it. And you can buy these erasers that have a little bit of grit mixed in, so they're even more abrasive. And sometimes those erasers can work even better for this type of drawing, this type of erasure. Now, I am talking, and not actually doing any drawing. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of drawing as well here. All right, and you're about 5 minutes in. It's going to go quickly, y'all. So even though it seems like you have more time, 20 minutes, that 20 minutes will roll by really, really quickly. So try to keep it as a fairly rapid process, right? So you're drawing more in the amount of time you have. You're not drawing more slowly. That's all my students just groaned because they've heard me say that a million times. All right. I love, Rachel and Atticus are testing y'all too. This is a nice, difficult pose that they're giving, which I love to see. The other thing with this type of drawing, when you're building up these kinds of forms, is you have to be patient with letting some of the information go. We have a tendency when we do drawing of the body and life drawing to want to describe everything, every fiber, every nuance, every fingertip, every detail. And actually drawings will feel more natural. They'll feel more like the event, more like your experience of the body and your experience in space. If you let some of that information go and you operate by suggestion rather than description. Keep going. At the end of this, we're gonna have to wake up, I think, Atticus and Rachel. It's warm, we've got the music is going. If there are any other questions that come in, just float them my way. Okay. This is something when y'all go and visit the museum and see these paintings, and you begin to work through from the earlier paintings from the 15th and 16th century and begin working through into the paintings into the 17th and 18th century, you'll begin to see these dynamics and tensions between those paintings that use far more line, more of that rigid line to define things, and paintings that are softer, that use more color and interaction of shape to define things.
What was the difference between suggestion and description?
Yeah, well, when I say that's a, we got a question about what I said about suggestion and description, and when I use those terms, what I really mean by that is description is really trying to define a particular part of the body through giving a lot of information about it. So trying to define a hand because it has all of the parts of a hand, all of the fingers, all the detail, as opposed to giving the suggestion of a hand, which you might be able to do just with a few strokes of your pencil or your charcoal, or by rubbing back through it very, very softly and quickly. And so it's a matter of trying to find that balance, giving enough information that your viewer can really see see and feel the body that they're looking at, but you're not over describing it in many ways. I hope that kind of makes sense. I feel like I haven't articulated that very well. Yeah. But it's hard to let someone, because you can see all that information. Those of you at home, you can see all of the information in the body. You can see all of the detail. Hairs on Atticus's head and Rachel's head. You can see eyebrows and eyelashes. You can see the tiny folds in the knuckles and all of those things. But we never draw all of those things. We're always being selective. We're making decisions. And that's what we're really talking about here, is being selective. And, you know, for lack of a better word, being playful too, giving yourself room to just test and try different modes and methods of working. All right, we are halfway there, y'all. A little bit more than halfway there. And again, if you feel like your dry ground's getting a bit weak, you can always just add a little bit more of your ground to the surface and rub it back through again. But there are so many of you out there joining us tonight for the draw along. I should be able to hear all of y'all scratching from here. All those pencils and charcoal going at once. What do you think, y'all? Does more time make it harder or easier? Oftentimes my students say that their fastest drawings are their best and their favorite drawings. When they have too much time to think about it, sometimes they get in their own way. People are too busy drawing to talk to me. Yeah, they should be. Good, that was a test, y'all. You passed. Now, in your last couple of minutes, if you haven't been doing any subtraction, if you haven't been cutting back through at all through that ground with your eraser, and you want to experiment with that, now is the time to do it. All right. Y'all holding up okay? All good? Yep, good. All right. Y'all, we're in the home stretch now. More than halfway through. just a minute and we can do a check-in with my drawing too in just a minute, so I can show y'all, how soft, even I've just been building up so many layers on my drawing that it's really, really dense and really, really soft. And I'll show it to you in just a minute so you get a sense of it. All right, y'all. I hope that's going well for you. And as Shannon said at the beginning, I want to say a special thank you to everybody that's been tagging me as you share your drawings. It's great. They've been popping up all over my social media, and I love seeing them. I love seeing where y'all are working. So people have been posting images to show that they've got us up on their big screen TVs, or they've got us sitting on their desktops, or people are all over the place working, and it's fantastic. It looks so great for us to see all of that variety and that diversity. So please feel free, and we encourage you to just keep sharing that stuff. It's great. And I'll try to get in and have a look at your drawing too if you post it. All right. Want to do a check-in before the final 5 minutes here? Just give me a moment. Oops, hopefully I didn't pull out my microphone there. Before you switch cameras there, all right, let's just do a quick check-in here. Let's just switch cameras, and I'll show you how I'm working that drawing of Atticus now. So you can see that I'm really using that softness of the background, and I'm using my plastic eraser to pull out the light shape as it cuts against that. I'm letting the thigh go to dark, pulling out the knee, but then because the thigh is dark, letting some light come through in the background. So the darkness of the thigh pulls against that light. So really, I just keep pushing and pulling and playing with those lights and darks and those shapes as I develop this drawing. And I'll just keep going. And I'm not afraid to just rub whole parts of it out, to redraw them back in, and to really find what I think is the subtlety and the relationship of the body to the space in this drawing. Okay, let's go back to Atticus and Rachel for the final couple of minutes here. Again, the real challenge here is also to see the body as part of the space. So often in life drawing, what we wind up with is this kind of white void of space, and the body just sort of floating on top of it, and in some cases looking almost like it's been collaged onto the surface. But part of this working in dry ground and looking at the Rococo and looking at the Impressionists is starting to think about that entire atmosphere, and again, the feeling of that atmosphere and the way the body sort of vibrates in and out of the space around the body. And that's what you're exploring. The dry ground enables you to do that because you're constantly rubbing back in and then reestablishing your form and then rubbing it again. And through that experience that you're having, that will quite literally inundate the drawing with your experience, and the viewer will feel all of that activity and that experience building up. The density of your experience of drawing is reflected in the graphic density of the drawing, and that's a really, really beautiful thing. And that's what's going to take a lot of these old forms, these old paintings, things that have been dead and gone for hundreds of years, and bring them right back up to now and make them so vibrant and so contemporary. I'm going to give you all 2 more minutes. How's that sound? That's generous, right? Yeah. 2 more minutes. And then we will sneak in one more drawing, although we won't have quite as long for the last drawing. Now, I think I mentioned I can't remember, one of the draw-alongs that I did earlier this year, or maybe it was during the lockdown last year, I talked a lot about erasers. I went on a little jag. I showed all sorts of different erasers. Um, you know, prior to prior to the invention of the eraser, artists had a lot of other options for erasure. And as I mentioned before, like chamois, little pieces of leather worked well for erasing. Um, some artists used to use bread or even bread dough as an eraser that predated rubber erasers. But one of the other primary methods that artists used for erasure was scraping. And dry grounds, I didn't want to really get into this tonight because it's a little bit too much. It's a bridge too far. But using a nice straight edged razor or an X-Acto or anything that's a really sharp blade, when you're working with dry ground, you can actually scrape back into your surface and get some really, really beautiful results. If you do it, you just scrape lightly. You're not trying to get down and shave your paper, but you can scrape back across that dry ground. And again, you'll get a type of graphic effect that you can't get with an eraser. You can't get any other way. All right, final minute, y'all. I think since nobody shaves with single blade razors anymore, the only place to get them is probably the hardware store, I reckon. You could try scraping your drawing with one of those cartridges that you buy. Yeah. Anything like that, like a craft blade or anything. I was thinking of one of those cartridge razors. It's got like 7 blades in it and a lubrication strip. That probably wouldn't work very well. All right, let's break right there. All right, nice job, y'all. Nice job. All right. Oh, yeah. Y'all can stretch it out, breathe it out a bit. Okay, I'm going to pull back out. There we go. Nice. And let me refocus so I can step back into frame here. There we go. All right, y'all. Really, really well done. Okay, now I can't wait to see how these are coming out. So again, Shannon will come back on at the end and remind y'all again about those, how to share those and how to tag those drawings so that we can find them. And we really, really are looking forward to seeing them and seeing how different all of your drawings are and all of the different approaches that you've had. I want to go into one final drawing. And for this final drawing, we're going to zoom right in and we're going to do a little tribute both to Renoir and to Fragonard. And we're going to do a little bit of a portrait. And we're going to do, just in the age of COVID, knowing that here in Brisbane, we're looking at another week of wearing masks, it looks like. Is that right? We've been extended another week. That's right. So we have that to look forward to. I know that we're still in pretty good shape here. And, our thoughts and best wishes go out to all of our friends around the country who are enduring, more strict lockdowns than we are here. But I want to really zoom right in now, and we'll do a little bit of a portrait, a masked portrait. And so we'll go with our final 10 minutes. We're going to do one more dry ground. So this is your opportunity. Get yourself a fresh sheet of paper, start rubbing it in. We're going to have Atticus and Rachel sit nice and close to one another. I'm going to zoom right in and we'll have this opportunity to do a double portrait to finish us out for tonight. And again, take this opportunity to test, to experiment, to play. Try layering on some more material. If you feel like you've been a little tentative up to this point, or you've still been wanting to go back and draw those outlines, those hard contours around things, take this opportunity to try to get right in there and just lay some material down, push and pull that material on the surface and really let those values and shapes come through. All right, so let's do one final drawing. Let's switch it over now. And let's get into, get your paper all prepped. I am gonna zoom right in and focus. Just let me get my glasses off so I can see. I'm gonna zoom right in and focus and let's do it. Let's actually get y'all, if possible, even a little bit closer. Well, no, we're losing you now, Rachel, sorry. Yeah, that's good, perfect. All right, excellent. And let me focus. Perfect. How's that looking on screen? Yeah, no, we're just really focusing on the portraits here. Does that look pretty good? All right, nice. Okay, let's dive right in, y'all. Let's go 10 minutes. Well, now let's go 9 minutes on this drawing, and that'll bring us right to the end. As you start on this drawing, just a few reminders about all of the exceptional programs that are happening for the European Masterpieces show from the Met at the Gallery of Modern Art. I'll be doing, of course, another draw along, virtual draw along next week on Thursday. We've got a couple of in-person draw alongs we're going to do in the museum in, I believe that's coming up in September, where we're going to be doing some live life drawing, multiple models. We're going to have a bit of a masquerade party. I'm not quite sure if that's sold out yet or not. Shannon's going to jump in the chat and say, sorry, it's already sold out. But we've got that coming up. I'm also doing a workshop coming up near the end of the exhibition for teenagers, a teens workshop, where I'm going to introduce teens to some of the revolutionary methods of drawing that the artists in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century were using that are exemplified in the show. There are also the Up Late programs coming up in August, and so there's so many wonderful things going on. And of course, we have exceptional models that are posing in the exhibition every day in the afternoon. So you can go in, see the exhibition, and also sit down and do some drawing from costumed models who have beautiful costumes that have been made to reflect costumes that are in the paintings in the exhibition. So it is it just warms me to no end to see the commitment that the gallery has made to drawing as part of this exhibition, and really acknowledging the deep history of drawing that underpins all of the work in the exhibition too. So please join us, come to the museum, see the show, and celebrate by doing some drawing. All right, about 6 more minutes, y'all. I quite like that composition. I'm sort of looking over your shoulder at the screen there. It's really nice. Again, look at that background. You've got that beautiful, I know you're getting a bit of a pink glow on one side, but look at the black background and use that black background. So again, you can, I'm not drawing this time, so unfortunately I'm not going to show you, but just like in the last drawing you saw of mine, the drawing of Atticus, you can really lay in that black background and then begin to lift your lights out of that. So you really see the shape, the form, and you see the contour, not because you've drawn a line, but because you're seeing that light shape colliding right against that dark background. Then if you start to look at a lot of other artists' drawings, and you also start to look at paintings, you'll see the way artists do that over and over again. They use the background, the field behind the figures as a way to amplify the figures and pull them out. Again, when you only use line, the only thing that you have to distinguish the form from the background or the form from the field is that one line. But now you can really lay out an atmosphere, lay out that background, lay out that tone, and then lift Rachel and Atticus right out of it. And you'll get, again, a really, really beautiful and sensitive quality of the light in the figure. Sorry, was there another question? No, okay. Everybody's too busy drawing.
The on-site workshops are sold out.
Oh, okay. Sorry, y'all. Did Shannon put that in the chat? Yeah, okay. Well, apparently our Naked Mayhem, our masquerade life drawing parties are sold out already. So if you're out there and you got one of those tickets, brilliant. It'll be beautiful to see you in a couple of weeks. But if you missed out, I apologize. There will be more in the future. There's always more opportunities, right? And Atticus, you're working that with us, aren't you? Yeah. All right, on. This is just a great, this is as with all of these draw alongs, this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the QAGOMA YouTube channel. And when that happens, I'm going to come back and draw this too, because I'm looking at that image on screen right now and I love it. I love the bottom heaviness of the composition and that little bit of pink that's coming in from the left-hand side. So I'm going to look forward to doing this drawing when I have some time to sit down and do it. All right, y'all. I'm giving you exactly 2 more minutes. And when that 2 minutes is up, we are going to be practically out of time. Or let me amend that. We will be out of time. So let me just say, while you finish up over these last couple of minutes, that I hope you've really enjoyed this process. I know it's a very different means of drawing. It's a different way to think about drawing, what we did last week, where you might cover your entire sheet of paper in these different mixtures and concoctions of adhesive, binders, glues, different types of textures and fillers that will give you different textures to draw back on top of. And the same thing this week, working with this dry ground to completely change the character of your surface, the character of your paper, and to change the character of the materials that you're adding, the drawing materials that you're putting down on that surface. And I hope for some of you, this has kind of unlocked some possibilities and you're starting to think about ways that you can come up with your own experiments, your own concoctions. And again, really think about making the drawing surface your own in the same way that the drawing is your own through your use of material, through your hand, your voice. You don't have to make do just with the drawing surfaces that are industrially available to you over the counter too. You can really manipulate those surfaces, really play with them, really get that surface into the exact kind of quality you want, where your sensitivities can really be amplified by the sensitivities of those surfaces that you're working on. Now, if I've got paper purists out there who love just that quality of the fiber of the paper and the way materials interact with that, I get it, because I love that too. And it's a different way of working. And so I wouldn't argue that working with grounds is superior or inferior to working straight onto the beautiful textures and fibers of paper. It just opens up a whole other realm of possibilities for you. And of course, I've only showed you the clay, the talc, the chalk, and the cornstarch here this evening, but there are many, many, many other types of dry grounds that you can add to the surface of a paper. Oxide, as I mentioned before, oxides, ochres, white pigments like titaniums and zincs. I mean, there's so many things you can do to add different qualities to that paper. All right, you have 30 more seconds, y'all, on this drawing. And then please, when you are all done, take some photographs, and please take some photographs of your setup. We'd love to see where you are at home. If you're coming to us from lockdown somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world, please give us a shot of where you are, how you're working, a little bit of insight. And it's been really great to see y'all sharing that with each other and see the responses as people share their environments and their studios and their places where they're getting creative and drawing along. And we're out. All right. Please, everybody at home, I swear to you, we will hear you. Help me thank Atticus and Rachel for their work here this evening. Bravo. Yeah, well done. Well done. All right, y'all. We have one more session, which is coming up next Thursday, and that's our dark manner. We're going to talk about tenebrism, tenebrozzo, the thing that really defines the Baroque manner. And I'll be showing you again some new techniques and different techniques for getting that dark manner down into your drawings. And we will have Atticus and Rachel back with us again next week. And we're going to be doing some different kinds of poses and also some different kinds of lighting, some really, really theatrical and dramatic lighting next week. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. Thank you again for joining me in my studio here. Thank you again to Atticus and Rachel. Thank you to Taya for helping and producing here this evening. Special thank you to Shannon and the team over at QAGOMA too. And with that, we'll say good night and we'll see everybody next week. All right. Thanks, y'all.